I don't know. There we go. Okay, it says we're live. Anyway, what's up, comic book fans? This is Pete from Comic Books Transformed, and I am here with my friend Brian, my co-host. And on this channel, we talk about all of the comic books and we talk about movies and TV shows that are adapted from all of your favorite comic books. Brian, you're a Star Wars fan, right?
Yes.
Yes. That's good.
No, I don't.
Do you have what?
So I was looking for anything Star Wars near me, but it's too far away.
Oh, well, what do you got down there in your beautiful basement?
I actually don't have that much Star Wars stuff down here. I have a Darth Revan figure and a Mandalorian. That's about it.
Do you have like a transformer that transforms into a Star Wars thing?
Yes. Shelf. I have. There was a series of crossovers. I have Boba Fett turns into
Slave One.
Starship.
Yes.
Because we can't say the other word anymore.
Yes.
And I think I have an Obi-Wan one too. There were others, but I didn't get them. I could swear I had a Vader that turned into a TIE bomber, but I can't find that anywhere.
Oh, cool. And then I'm assuming that Obi-Wan turns into a Jedi starfighter.
Yes.
Very cool. Yeah, today we are here to talk about Andor Episode 9, and we're also talking about the series Tales of the Jedi, which just premiered on October 26th on Disney+. Both shows are on Disney+. Brian, sometimes I wonder, like looking at Twitter, how much of this is like the algorithm just sort of reflecting back to me what I'm interested in, and how much is that there's this general excitement about things. You ever wonder about that?
General excitement about what though?
I mean, I just feel like I go on Twitter and every day it's just like, Andor's so good. How come people don't like Andor? Andor's so awesome. Like, do you see that?
You know what? I mean, I sent you that Twitter thread. There was some random Twitter thread.
Mm-hmm.
And the question was like, why aren't people watching Andor? And there was this like so many different reasons about why, and I was like shocked, honestly. Like, I mean, I would have guessed that like, okay, so it's not like blasters and lightsabers nonstop action or anything like that. It's definitely not as entertaining for kids or younger audiences that are maybe used to Star Wars because of that too. But it's and you could even argue too here that it is not really that Star Warsy, and it's just good.
Yes.
And like you remove a couple of characters here and there, and make some slight changes, and this could just be a science fiction show.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of what's sucking me in here. And I've definitely talked to people who absolutely love it, like ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems that that there's like a real big variance between how people feel about this and why.
Yes. I just think it's so strange, right? Because out of all the fandoms, I feel like Star Wars is the most polarized. I know that's not news to anyone, but Star Wars is a real kind of reflection of America, I feel like. Our country is so polarized, right? And it's like you either feel strongly about one side or you feel really strongly about the other. And a lot of times it's this sort of prequels and original trilogy versus the sequel trilogy, or it's like kind of prequels and the original trilogy versus like the Disney stuff. I mean, I know that's essentially the same thing, but like a lot of people hate the Disney shows. Some people love some of the Disney shows. It's very polarized, but it always seems like there's one camp that really likes the sort of Western, fun, desert adventure aspect of Star Wars. And then there's this other side that thinks that it's good for there to be like diversity in Star Wars, and that they like really butt heads with each other. Those two sides.
All I want is good content.
All you want is good content. Yes.
I don't necessarily care what's behind it or what's in it, as long as it's good.
Yeah. I understand. And I mean, to me, this show is fantastic. And the best thing is the title of episode 9 is Nobody's Listening. And I was going to make that the title of our podcast too. I wish that I was the only person that came up with that joke, but someone else made that joke today already too.
I'm sure it was a pretty low hanging fruit there, but
yes. Not only that, but one of the things I saw right before we started talking was there was a meme where they showed Andor screaming, "Nobody's listening," and then they cut to the end of Rogue One, and he's there with Jyn Erso on the tower, And she's like, "Do you think that anybody's listening?" And he says, "Yes, I do." I thought that was a really nice touch.
That is wow. That is pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, man. So let's just get right into it. Did you know by the time of last episode that one of the guys that's on the team that's helping Andor in the prison was played by the guy, by actor Christopher Fairbank, who's in the 1989 Batman? Did you know that?
I did not.
He's the guy that, there's the two muggers in the beginning, and he's like, "There ain't no bat." You know that guy?
Yes, I do.
The one that Michael Keaton holds, and he says, "I'm Batman." He says it to this guy, and that's Olaf in Andor.
Very interesting. Yeah, that's a nice little Easter egg there.
Yes, and I feel bad for Olaf, especially in this episode.
Yeah, I mean, we've although I feel like I've been seeing these characters for a lot longer, but we've only seen them for 2 episodes. But like, they planted that seed of him, at the end of his life, the second you saw him, and it's slow, and like you knew that was coming, but it didn't change how it felt anyway,
Yes, grounded down by the Imperial machine, essentially.
Yeah.
Pretty horrible stuff. There's a lot of horrible stuff in this episode.
Yeah, man.
I know you're a big fan of Bix, and she just gets this god-awful torture sequence in this episode.
Yeah, like I think this episode here, the opening segment and the closing segment were like absolutely perfect. Like I could not change a thing to make them better.
Yes.
The interrogation and like the interrogation, what they do, how they explain how they're torturing her is so like over the top and detailed, but it works so well.
Yep.
Like I'm like, oh my God, that sounds horrible. And it just, it really like they really went full force into showing like we said last week that they intended to have Miro seem like a semi-sympathetic figure at first because she's a woman in a man's world here and with the Empire and nobody's listening to her, blah blah blah. And then it's like, nope, she's the Empire. She's what you're worried about, and she is awful. And it, Denise, is it Denise Go or Gao? I don't know how to pronounce her last name.
Right,
absolutely fantastic in this scene. There was the very end of it. The last line she says, but I don't even remember what it was, but she's like staring real close up at Bix, and there's this little twitch in her eye. I that actually gave me chills.
Yes. She is practically snarling when she's talking to her, just like the look on her face, and she's talking so intense. And then there's that doctor who assists her with the torture. The doctor does that description, like you just said, and there's many ways they could have filmed this. One of the things was you could have maybe heard a little bit of the sound that these creatures made. But just for people that for some reason are listening to our show or watching it and they have not seen Andor, go fucking watch it. But just to give context what we're talking about, essentially the Empire wiped out this whole race of people, and the sounds of them being exterminated produces some sort of like noise that like would make you lose your mind. And so they use that noise to interrogate people or to torture people.
And then on top of that horrible, awful description, they said that they isolated the signals of children of this race to make it worse. Like,
right?
Who thinks of these things? But like, it sounded awful. Like I was like, oh, I was visually just shocked by that.
Mm-hmm. Well, you asked the question of who thinks about this, and this episode was written by the man who is the showrunner for House of Cards. His name is Bo Willimon, and he was the showrunner for House of Cards on Netflix for 4 seasons. Now, House of Cards was a sort of over-the-top political thriller with Kevin Spacey and Robin Wright, and me and Sherry just loved it. It sort of took a nosedive when Kevin Spacey got in trouble and they had to write him off the show. But it was a pretty despicable show. So it doesn't really surprise me that he came up with this torture. But what I love about this show is that it is often very subtle. Whereas, like, if this was like Game of Thrones or like House of the Dragon, then like, I don't know, she would have like flashbacks of the people being exterminated or something. Like they would show the children like getting blown up or something. It'd be like so over the top. Whereas here, she has a device on her head. You don't hear any of the sound. You just do a tight close-up of her face. And it's just so perfect because it's way worse.
Yeah. I think it was much more effective to do it that way. And I don't know how you would even pretend to recreate something that sounds that awful.
You can't. Yeah.
So, like, yes, it enhanced the description alone was better than actually hearing it.
Exactly. And you know, I have my other channel, The Lastercast, where we talk about horror, and that's something that comes up very frequently is sometimes describing something, making someone imagine it, is far more horrific than showing someone. So that's
like this opening scene felt like a standalone chapter in like a book. Like you could have written this in extremely well, like, as a novel.
Mm-hmm. And while we're kind of talking about this, I just want to point out that another great thing this show does is it's not like every scene is this sort of established thing where characters interact with each other or someone does an action. Sometimes a scene is just cutting to someone like looking at something. And at one point we look at Bix and she's just sitting by her bed, just broken. That's just like a 10-second scene. And then there's another scene where like Cassian is watching Olaf work on the machine and nothing's really being said. And there's no dialogue really. And we're just like, that's a scene on this show, but it's just so effective.
Yeah, because it's laying that especially a scene like that is laying out the groundwork for what happens later on with Olaf. Yeah.
Right. And one last thing about this torture sequence is it already reminded me of Star Wars. And I think it's very important to point out, like what you said, which is that this could be its own thing. It doesn't have to be Star Wars at all. But every so often they kind of put in these little Star Wars references. And in this one, they cut this scene just like they do in A New Hope, right when Leia's about to be interrogated by that probe droid or that droid in A New Hope. The door slams and you see an Imperial officer's feet and he like walks away. That's the exact same thing that happens in the big scene too.
Yeah, that's a great call out there, and that's a nice touch, I think.
Absolutely. It's from the same time period essentially too, maybe a little earlier. But let's keep the ball rolling. The guy who directed the episode, his name was Toby Haynes, and he's directed a lot of British things like Doctor Who and Sherlock, and then Black Mirror. And this show reminds me of Black Mirror every so often.
Yeah, I totally see that.
Yeah, especially the stuff with where they're on the prison planet and they're building things. You know.
Yeah, I mean that's all some prestige television there too. So I mean that it you know they're clearly knocking it out of the park with this, with the hiring the right people, and you know having everybody work on this just seems to be fantastic.
Absolutely, my man. Yeah. So let's see. I already kind of covered a lot of the things we were trying to say. Okay. I wanted to ask you about this, but actually, I wrote these notes and then I listened to Star Wars Explained, and they actually addressed one of the things. There's this guy, Anto Krieger, right? So they reference him in this episode. There was a pilot that was going to work for him, and the pilot gets captured in this episode. Anto Krieger was the guy that was going to work with, or that Luthen wanted to work with Saw Gerrera, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Because I want to do a shout out to Star Wars Explained. He did this great little video where he was breaking down all the different groups that Saw Gerrera mentioned last episode. And he's like, this is what I think this group is. This is what I think this group is. And I love little details like that.
Yeah, I definitely did not pick up on that. But that, again, there's just nice little detail there. Wasn't super called out. And it's just nice to see that just sitting there for you to find later on, you know?
Yeah. The Empire is definitely like striking back at this point in the show. And, you know, it seems like they're going to get Andor, or, I mean, they've definitely taken his life apart. You know, his mom is still safe, but essentially that's because they're using her as bait, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember if this was this episode or the last one, but the explanation that how they want to leave her there was also pretty brutal. It's like, you know, they literally call her bait.
So there's a lot for you know, Dedra. What's her last name? Besso or
Dedra Miro?
Dedra Miro. Sorry about that. So and so we'll talk about Andor in the prison in a second, but why don't we talk about Mon Mothma? What did you think about her scenes on Coruscant?
It was interesting that we see the connection between Vel and Mon Mothma. They're apparently cousins, although I'm wondering if that's some kind of front, but that's real or not. But I believe the daughter calls her aunt or something like that.
Yeah, Auntie Val, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, they're just trying to fund the rebellion, and they're coming from different sides here. And Mon wants Vel to kind of lay low a little bit so she doesn't get caught, because everything's very dangerous. It's a very dangerous time. The Empire is really cracking down on everybody, and they're really afraid that they're all going to get caught here.
Yeah. One thing that these last 2 episodes have really shown is that you get in bed with some strange bedfellows. Like, essentially, you have to be with criminals, because when the whole system is corrupt, when the whole system is the enemy, you have to essentially team up with criminals. Yeah. And in the previous episode, Saw Gerrera didn't want to work with certain people. In this episode, her banking friend, let me see, I have it written down.
Tay.
Colma, right? Is his last name? Yeah. He shows up, and he wants her to work with Davo Skulden.
By the way, I just have to give it up for just everyone that creates Star Wars characters' names. Because just hear the name, and it's like, oh, that's got to be a Star Wars character. And these all sound like Star Wars names. Like this. Yes. Excellent job.
Yes. Davo Skulden. That's definitely a Star Wars sounding name. And he's apparently a shady guy from Chandrila. So I don't know if we're going to see him on the show, but like, he's kind of necessary for Mon Mothma to keep doing what she's doing. I guess.
Yeah, I feel like we have 3 episodes left here. The next one's clearly going to be a heist, not a heist, a jailbreak, and then we have a 2-part finale. I don't know what that's exactly going to entail, but I feel like we will see this character either as like a teased scene for season 2, or just flat out in season 2.
Yeah. I know that I just saw a tweet. Let me see if I can even just pull it up right now. But it was from the showrunner. So he's talking about a guy named Tom Bissell being brought onto the show. This is Tony Gilroy. And he's basically saying that they wanted to have a Star Wars fan, someone that really knows the source material, working on season 2, because they're going to go to Yavin 4. So, like, I'm guessing that after this stuff gets resolved on Phoenix, or Ferrix.
Ferrix.
Yeah, after the stuff gets resolved there, I think the next step is probably going to like Yavin 4 for season 2.
Interesting, yeah. I'm excited, and I hope, even though the show is not lighting the ratings scales on fire here, I hope that they still continue with it. I know there's a plan to have 24 episodes, but I don't know how guaranteed that is with the reception. It's the lack of fan enthusiasm it's getting.
I feel like it's kind of a given. With Star Wars, it's so weird. They've announced like 4 movies at least that are not being made, or like maybe will one day get made. And I know that they've even kind of clamped down. They've said, okay, stop making announcements until something is more concrete. But I feel like with this, even if it has very low ratings, I think they're still going to have a season 2.
Yeah, I'm hoping that even if it's low ratings, the fact that it has a start and end that's only 2 seasons might help.
Yeah.
There's not going to be like, oh, well, we did 2 and it didn't really go anywhere, but they need 3 or 4 to finish it. Oh, well.
Yeah. No.
So
thanks.
hopefully, I really hope that we see this come to full circle.
Yes. Yeah, I would love it if it went like straight up to the beginning of Rogue One.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it would be great to have like just have Jyn Erso just being like the last scene or whatever. Yeah,
like he knows he has to go free her from prison.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about what actually happens on the prison on Narkina 5. Everyone is. I just see so many tweets or memes with Andy Serkis, and especially that one line that no more than 12, right?
Yeah.
Some people are saying that line is like the most iconic line in Star Wars now, besides "I am your father."
It's a damn good line, but I mean, it's all with the context of how it was presented. Throughout the episode, Andor is asking the question, how many guards are on each level, and he says no, and I'm sorry, is it Klein?
Kino.
Kino, God. Kino
like,
is
Kino from like Ninja Turtles 2, the pizza delivery guy.
Shit, yeah.
That's how you remember it.
So Kino is just dismissing him, saying like, "Stop talking about this shit. Everything's fine. We're gonna get out of here. You know, I only have this. I only have 200 days left or whatever, and I'm gonna get out of here." And you know, he believes in the system, and you just slowly see him break down over the course of the episode. And like again, it's incredibly telegraphed. It's very obvious what's going to happen throughout the entire episode, but it does not decrease the impact that it has at the end. Fantastic closing scene. Just the shot of them walking with the hands behind the head, and that line, the repetition of the question and the finally getting the answer was just pitch perfect.
Yep. I mean, I said this last episode too, but like Andy Serkis is, I think, an underrated actor. I think we always think of him as his like digital roles where he's using the motion capture suits.
Yep.
But just in general, he's a great actor. I mean, there's a reason why those roles where he's like Caesar or even Supreme Leader Snoke, of course, Gollum. Like, there's a reason why he's so good at that. It's because he's a great actor in general. So expressive on his face. You can see the conflict. You know, with this episode, we get the idea that essentially once you're arrested by the Empire, that's it. You're just in jail for the rest of your life. You're going to be doing this horrible job, working on a factory line, eating horrible stuff, and that they could, for very simple reasons, just wipe out an entire floor of prisoners. Just like, oh, they're all dead, and that's a terrifying concept.
That's another aspect too of that kind of telegraphed ending. There was that Kino was focusing on Olaf only having 40 days left, and you know he's like, but you only got 40 days, and he's only got 40 days. He says that multiple times throughout the episode, and you know, to him the promise of freedom is, you know, alive and well, and you know it gets crushed along the way here. That's essentially what happens, is that someone is supposed to leave, and then they get sent back to another floor, and they find out, and then the floor revolts, and then they all die, and then it kind of circulates throughout the entire prison. And then we get a confirmation of it from this an inmate who's a medical officer or something, doctor, whatever, and he kind of confirms what happens to Andor and Kino, and then you know, the seeds of a jailbreak and a revolt are now fully planted and growing.
Yeah, and Andor was already sort of working on these things. We see that he's sort of like whittling away at a pipe that's near the bathroom, and he's kind of taking note of things that move and stuff like that. Like, oh, turns out that this part of the prison doesn't get electrified when they go to...
Yes, he was also talking to another inmate in another table and saying, like, we should wait until this lift is halfway up and rush them. There's not that many there. Look at they mentioned there if they're wearing boots or not. They mentioned how they're touching the railing, how it must not be electrified.
Right.
So he's been plotting and planning this for a while now, and it just maybe because you know, his sentence was a lot longer. I mean, he had almost 3,000 days or something like that. But
something crazy.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny because when you first see him in the episode, you get the idea that he's just sort of like integrated into the experience, and he is just a part of the whole system, but he's secretly trying to think of ways to get out. And with Kino, he is so invested in the system, and he's always keeping his men in line so that they can be successful. But it's with the idea that the system works, that like essentially if you do your time, you can leave. And once he finds out that the system ultimately doesn't work, that's when he wants to rebel. And boy, is that a fucking political statement and a half right there, right? The system doesn't work. It's time to rebel. So
that's and again, that's really what's going on in real life.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just trying to think of what else there is about this episode. It's just really good in general. And it's really great to be talking about a show like this with you, because I think that in general, when we talk like this, we always get very serious and we kind of analyze things. And some of the stuff that we analyze maybe doesn't deserve to be analyzed. You know, it's sort of like we're overthinking it. With this show, though, we're not overthinking. I think we're underthinking it, actually.
Probably, yes. I mean, watching this show really wants me to, I really want to rank everything we've talked about this year.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's a spoiler in a sense, because I mean, I must want to put that somewhere important.
Yes.
But yes, like we've watched some things that have been excellent, some things that have been okay, and some things that have, not been so good. But
Jupiter's Legacy.
but you know what? There's definitely competition for the show. I mean, I would definitely put Peacemaker towards, on the higher echelon, and something else too. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head now.
You keep thinking about it, but I was going to ask you while you're thinking, have you seen the pitch meeting for She-Hulk yet?
Oh no, I saw it pop up, but I was in a meeting. I haven't watched it yet.
Okay. Yeah. You'll have to watch it at some point. I want to see what you think.
Okay.
Yeah. Gotta love that I plug all these other YouTube channels and not ours. That's good.
Yeah.
We are Comic Books Transformed. If you guys want to subscribe, please do. We want you guys to be a part of the conversation. What do you think about Andor? But I'm not done with this fucking episode. I know it sounds like the end of the video. Let's go on. We got more Star Wars today. We got Tales of the Jedi. Brian, do you remember the Tales of the Jedi comic from Dark Horse in like the 90s?
Yeah, I had a couple issues randomly back then.
Yeah. Totally different time period and different characters, but same title. And even the the font of the comic title looks like the font of the comic title or the show title.
It's possible. I don't totally remember the exact font or anything like that, but yeah, it must look similar.
Yeah. So 6 episodes, 15 minutes each. What do you think about the show as a whole?
I enjoyed it, and again, it's kind of pushing me to go back and watch Clone Wars and Rebels and Bad Batch and everything that I haven't yet. I had to look a couple things up just to get some better context for some of the episodes here. I feel like a lot of this episode was filling in gaps, not gaps, or not so much filling in gaps, but reinforcing ideas that were kind of handled off screen.
Yeah.
Obviously we're focusing on Ahsoka Tano and Dooku, Count Dooku. Did they ever give him a name other than Dooku? Does he have a first name?
I have not seen it. Do you want to make one up? Like I can see if you.
His name's Greg.
Greg Dooku?
Greg Dooku. That's not Star Warsy.
No. Like I feel like if it was Star Warsy, it'd be like Virulus Dooku.
That sounds pretty evil. Yeah. Okay. I like that.
No problem.
I found it very interesting that this show, which is released during Andor, that where we're seeing this very oppressive empire, that we're kind of seeing the opposite, where we're seeing a very greedy, corrupt republic. And I think, again, kind of like politics today.
Whoa! Yeah.
And I'm sure that we can see that in our own government right now.
Absolutely,
both sides here, and I'm not very happy with any side of politics, really.
Right. Exactly. Ditto.
So I found that to be very interesting overall here, and the episodes are they vary. I think not too much, but overall I did really enjoy the show. I wasn't like super crazy about the style, the art style. I think the characters almost look more like marionettes. Like I kept thinking, like, this looks like Team America.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look bad or anything like that, but the writing and what they're showing, what they're reinforcing was good, especially with some. There were some more standout ones to me.
Yes. It's funny that you say that about the similarities between our world and Star Wars, right? Because when you watch the sequel trilogy, I remember the speech that Hux does where he talks about like the corruption of the New Republic. And whenever you have these polarized sides, these black and white sides, it's always like, well, we're totally right, and this is evil about them. And then the other side's like, well, we're totally right, and this is what's evil about them. And it's just essentially the inverse of each other, right?
Yep.
And so you have these 2 episodes, I believe 2 and 3, where they essentially kind of have like the same problem. There's these 2 corrupt senators, and Dooku intervenes with both of them. But it shows that, like, the people suffer no matter what, right? Whether it's under the Empire, under the Republic. And
essentially, there's no winning for the common man.
No. I mean, maybe if you're a Jedi at some point, you might be kind of lucky, or like a senator at one point, or if you're the Emperor. But um, this show was mainly written by Dave Filoni. There was one episode where two other writers wrote the episode, but otherwise, out of the six, they're all written by Dave Filoni. He wrote it while he was traveling around during the making of the first season of The Mandalorian. And essentially, the idea behind it is that it is two different paths with two different outcomes. Like you said, it's Ahsoka and it's Count Dooku. And one of the questions I had for you was the very first episode is when Ahsoka is born, and it shows like it's supposed to be 1 year after she's born for the majority of the episode.
Yep.
I was wondering why they did that one first. I guess like because Ahsoka is Dave Filoni's creation and he loves her so much. And it'd be bookends because she's in the last episode and the first episode. But doesn't it make more sense to do at least one of the Dooku episodes first? Because I mean,
well, you essentially have an Ahsoka episode, and then you have 3 Dooku episodes. I think I wouldn't have wanted to interrupt those 3 Dooku episodes.
Yeah.
And the story they're trying to tell there. So I think this makes sense because this was the most separated of the stories. I think this is the most standalone, that first one. I also got a lot of vibes of Prey from that.
Prey.
In general. Prey, like the movie Prey, Predator movie Prey.
Oh yes. Okay, yeah. I get it. Yeah.
So and I don't think they're implying that it happened earlier than the other stuff. It's just it was standalone. It was a nice break of things, and it would have been weird to jump from her as a baby to her as a teen, I guess. So that's why that one was first.
Okay. For the 3 episodes for each of these people, right? Because Ahsoka has 3, Dooku has 3. It's 3 different phases in their life too, right? So it's like her as an infant, then her as like Anakin's pupil, and then her after the Jedi have fallen. And then for Dooku, it's like when he starts to get an idea that the Republic is corrupt, then it's like he is like really losing faith in the Jedi, and then finally he's like become a Sith, you know. And I don't need to hide this from anybody, but like episode 4, which is the Sith Lord, was like by far my favorite episode, and I just love that episode.
Yeah, I totally agree here, and I gotta just say in general, just like God bless Dave Filoni.
Yeah.
Like if they leave the Star Wars, the future of Star Wars with Dave Filoni and is it Tony Gilroy?
Tony Gilroy is the Andor guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I would be very happy if that's who we had shepherding Star Wars in the future. Like
Yes.
And it seems like Dave Filoni does at least have a hand in a lot of what's going on. But my question here is, have you ever heard Dave Filoni's interpretation of the Duel of Fates?
Absolutely have, yes.
Okay, man. I wasn't super aware of that before watching this, but I watched it afterwards, literally minutes before this. And his passion and his explanation of why that battle is great, which previously to me is like, oh wow, this is a cool lightsaber fight in a boring movie. But it gives you kind of like a whole new perspective on it, really. Mm-hmm. Like, and I would love to see a Star Wars Infinities if they were decided to do that again. Essentially, Star Wars What If?
Yeah.
If Qui-Gon didn't die there, I would love to see what would have happened. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's boring and the good guys win, but it's such an interesting take on it that it's something that I never would have thought of on my own. Yeah, and I'm glad that the ideas of that are expanded upon here and reinforced by Dave, and then moving forward, hopefully we'll get more stuff like this that's really well thought out and put together.
Yeah. I mean, like with Star Wars, I really, really fell in love with Star Wars after watching Return of the Jedi over and over again. But then I just went into the expanded universe, and it was first novels and comics and video games. And, clearly George Lucas had this amazing universe that he created in his head, but with the intervention of other people, it just got better and better. And I think that, like, The Empire Strikes Back is the first example of where it could go, right? Because Star Wars is great in itself. It's a classic film, standalone film, perfect, right? but then the Empire Strikes Back like expands it, and it makes it a lot more complex and interesting. And Empire Strikes Back might be sort of the zenith for Star Wars, like the top, right? With the expanded universe, they were able to take things like Attack of the Clones, which I think is the worst Star Wars movie, or well, maybe Rise of the Skywalker is the worst, then Attack of the Clones. But like they make that better, right? Like Andor is like making everything better, more interesting, more depth. And this show, I feel like, is the perfect example of that. Like because of Dave Filoni, like you said, he's able to he made the Darth Maul battle so much more important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we could go episode by episode, but I feel like we're kind of hitting all the points I wanted to hit. But I think that like what I wanted to point out that I liked so much was that episode 4 in particular. You have like the voices of some of the actual actors mixed in with like the Clone Wars voices, right? Like,
yes.
Do you know which voice actors were from the actual movies?
Liam Neeson reprised his role, and then Ashley Eccleston reprises her role as Ahsoka. I don't think anybody else is replacing. Reprising their role.
Ian McDiarmid wasn't.
Maybe he was. I didn't notice that. I know Bail Organa was Phil Lamar. There was another person who was Dooku. Oh, you know who Dooku was? Corey Burton, who was Shockwave.
Oh,
although
awesome.
There were times where I thought he sounded more like Alan Rickman than Christopher Lee.
Yes, that's a very good point. Yeah, I thought he was a little off. And then for Bail Organa, Jimmy Smith's. I mean, forgive me, I don't know Jimmy Smith's ethnicity, but Jimmy Smith actually doesn't really have a super thick accent unless he's sort of playing it for a character. And when he plays Bail Organa, he does not have a thick accent.
Yeah.
But then when Phil Lamar did him, he did kind of have an accent. I was like,
a little bit, yeah.
With Palpatine, when he's Darth Sidious or when he's Senator Palpatine, Chancellor Palpatine, they've had multiple actors play him. They've had Tim Curry play him at one point. They had Sam Witwer play him. But I think that like this one literally sounded like Ian McDiarmid during that 4th episode.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious if it is him now.
Yeah, so and please bring up other episodes while we're having this discussion. But I wanted to really focus on 4 because I don't know if people know this from watching our show, but Emperor Palpatine is my favorite Star Wars character. I love the Emperor.
I actually didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
I didn't know that. No.
Oh well, now you do. Now we're even more soulmates.
Yeah, anyway, determined.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So that episode I just think is so great. We have Qui-Gon right before he's about to fight Darth Maul, and then you have this tree that Dooku is standing in front of after Qui-Gon has died. And there's very little dialogue, but Yaddle shows up, and we get to see who Yaddle is. One of the big controversies was that Yaddle didn't speak in that mixed up way that Yoda talks.
Yes, I was seeing that, yeah.
But I think that was a good choice because she had some extremely serious scenes. If she was talking like Yoda, it'd be kind of goofy,
I agree, yeah.
Yeah. But there's this great shot where Yaddle's walking in one direction, Dooku's walking in the opposite direction. I love that. We see Dooku erase the planet Kamino from the Jedi archives. Then we have this scene, and this is like what I'm talking about before with the idea of like making Attack of the Clones better. We have him flying to that sort of rundown part of Coruscant where he goes to the end of Attack of the Clones, and he meets with Darth Sidious, and their dialogue is great. And there's also that idea of, Darth Sidious doesn't trust him, and that's probably for good reason because he is a Sith Lord, right?
Yep.
And then there's just this epic battle, and everything is like a mirror because, like, obviously, he fights Yoda at the end of Attack of the Clones, but this one is so much more serious, even though it's the same dynamics, same mechanics.
Yeah, because you're seeing his literal first steps into the dark side here. I mean, maybe not the first step, but like this is his final step into the dark side, really.
Yes. I mean, this is an aspect of Star Wars that I love so much. And I kind of do feel like it's the main aspect of Star Wars, which is like you have a character that uses the Force. They're strong with the Force, and they could go to the dark side, they could go to the light side. Some characters become evil, some stay true. And I think that's like the meat and potatoes of Star Wars is that.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's more like that's the meat and the potatoes of the Skywalker saga, and then there's stuff that's unrelated, but like everything kind of stems from that.
Yeah.
So I thought that at one point, like Palpatine was maybe going to like shoot her with Force lightning and knock her out the window when she was standing on that ledge, and then when it looked like she got crushed by that door, I was like, "Oh, damn, that's intense."
Yeah, and then they kind of temporarily try to trick you when she opens the door again, but then she just kind of passes out and then just gets like done dirty.
Yeah. So did you prefer the Dooku episodes to the Ahsoka episodes, or vice versa?
You know what? I saw a lot of people talking about how the 5th episode, which was Ahsoka training, and kind of saying that was the weakest link. And I actually don't think so. I actually think that was one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, not much happens in it, but again, I think back to that Dave Filoni explanation of the Duel of the Fates and how it was basically a duel over the fate of Anakin.
Yeah.
And that Qui-Gon was the father figure that he needed, and Qui-Gon was kind of advanced in the thought that the way the Jedi were currently going with their kind of detached monk-like state and their current involvement with politics was too much, and they needed to change. And so it's interesting to see how, that the reason why Ahsoka survived Order 66 is because Anakin was so hard on her. And maybe that's something that's very obvious to someone who watched the Clone Wars, but I don't think they literally showed that scene elsewhere. So I really appreciated that the reinforcement that had, because it's like, it's interesting that, we always see Jedis and they're flipping around and deflecting laser bolts left and right, and they seem like they're invincible. But Order 66 happens and they're all just cut to shreds in seconds.
Right.
And this is explaining that, like, they're used to defending against predictable patterns of battle droids and drones and whatever, and that the real flesh and blood thoughts of highly trained clone troopers that are real are a lot more deadly, and that the extensive training that he put Ahsoka through was what ultimately allowed her to survive.
I mean, really great observation. My question to you is, though, why did Anakin do
that? Because I think he was also disenfranchised with the Jedi and the Council. He thought they just weren't doing enough, and they weren't. I mean, clearly he was breaking a lot of their rules. He didn't fully buy into everything. I mean, he had trust in Obi-Wan and his friend and all that, but ultimately, just like Qui-Gon, he was disenfranchised with the Jedi, but took a darker route because he fed into his impulses and the guilt of his past mistakes, losing his mother, abandoning her, all that, and he's just trying to, push Ahsoka to be better and be the best she can, that so that something like that won't happen to her that will happen to her mom, his mom.
That's what I think. I think because that's kind of the through line that's in the prequels. That is like, I'll even keep people from dying. Anakin says in Attack of the Clones. Man, we're talking about Attack of the Clones a lot.
Padme dying as well.
Right, but at that point, she hadn't died yet, right?
Yeah, so true.
But like he starts to have visions of her dying, and that's the one idea with Anakin, is that he doesn't want to lose his loved ones. That's what turns into the dark side ultimately. And Ahsoka was one of his loved ones, and I think that was just his way of sort of building that up.
I don't want to lose my loved ones, but I have no problem killing a bunch of little baby Jedi.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I personally think that the episode 3, which was the one where like it's Mace Windu and Count Dooku going to the planet with the corrupt senator, I feel like that was the weakest link out of all of them.
Possibly, although I liked ultimately that episode said a lot of what the second episode said. but what I liked about it was how Dooku thought that Mace agreed, but then ultimately was betrayed because he took a seat on the council.
Right.
I really thought that was a really great scene there and very important. But otherwise, that episode really just said the exact same thing as the second one.
Right. And I believe that episode is the one that's written by 2 other people besides Dave Filoni.
Okay.
So it's kind of interesting that it's like, and it was weird too, is that like, I know it was 2 different planets because the senator's son takes over after the senator in the first episode, but like the guards and everything almost looked similar to the guards.
Yeah, they did.
In both
that's
episodes.
probably a pitfall of the animation style. It's so expensive to make the models that they have to make, whatever use they can out of them.
Yeah, agreed. So then I want to talk about that last episode too, which I read was that episode was actually adapted from the Ahsoka book, because there was an Ahsoka book that came out in, I believe, 2018. And it's like they said it's loosely based on it. And so we have an Inquisitor in there. They don't say like, if it's 5th brother or whatever fucking brother. There's always like a number and a brother or sister, right? But this one visually kind of looked like a plague doctor. They had sort of like a beak, and they were very menacing. Did you notice that like when Ahsoka killed him, it almost looked like he like deflated? Did you notice that?
Yeah, something would happen. Like it looked like she cut his head off, and then it deflated. Like the mask. Maybe it was like an Obi-Wan kind of thing in Star Wars. He just turns to Force Ghost.
well, the idea though is that, or are you making a joke?
Sort of.
Well, because the idea with the Force Ghost, I think that's just for like the good guys, right? Only a select few. Yeah, maybe what I was taking it was like maybe his fucking head fell out when she chopped it off, and then that's just like the mask kind of folding back.
Maybe. Okay, that could be it too. That's probably a more logical explanation.
That's more deserving for that bird man, because he was a real asshole. He just killed that whole fucking village.
Yeah.
So then the implication is that she goes off with Bail Organa, right? At the end of that.
Yes. I'm curious. I know ultimately what happens at the end of, I guess it's Rebels, and where she goes there, but I'm there's definitely a gap in her story there. And maybe I'll read that novel too, in between all these show watchings.
Yeah, that's the whole thing, right, man? Is that like I love Star Wars. I've been reading Star Wars since I was like 11 or something. I'm 40 years old, and I've read a shit ton of Star Wars books. I was reading the High Republic series, and I was covering it with Mike B on this channel. We kind of took a break. I got more into horror stuff. But I still have one of the High Republic books on my, Audible. And also there's kind of crossover with stuff because, Marvel makes the Star Wars comics, and Charles Soule is like a major Star Wars writer, but then he's also a major Marvel writer too. I think he's actually kind of more Star Wars nowadays than
I don't think he's written any Marvel as far as I know.
That's right. Exactly. Same here too. So I don't know. It's a good time to be a Star Wars fan, even though the bipolar nature of the fandom seems to keep going. At least we're getting like quality stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, these 2 shows might be some of the best examples of why you should keep getting Disney Plus.
Yes. And they're not going to promote us at all. Thanks, guys. All right.
Discount.
Yeah. On this channel, we always like essentially plug Disney Plus and maybe Netflix every so often. On the Lastercast, it's always Shudder, and it's like kind of cool if you guys like tweeted us out every so often or something. But whatever. Anyway, my man, it has been a joy talking about Star Wars with you. And next week we have Black Panther.
Wait! I have to talk about something. So last night I went to the Smodcastle Cinemas.
Oh yeah!
Kevin Smith interviewed George R.R. Martin.
Very cool.
And, it was really cool. It was just kind of like a life story kind of interview, and career-wise, all that.
Right.
Very interesting, very funny, and Kevin Smith is doing something called the Mighty Marvel Society or something like that. So essentially, he's gonna, when a Marvel movie comes out, he's gonna have a screening, and then he's just gonna have like a live Q&A of it afterwards, even though he had nothing to do with any of it, just to talk about it with people. And I think that sounds amazing, and I kind of want to
Yeah,
go.
shit, yeah. That sounds fucking fun. I guess it would be in California because that's where he lives, right?
No, it's here.
What?
It's here. Yeah, like apparently he lives above this theater.
Oh, I know that he like grew up in like Red Bank or whatever, New Jersey, but like
he either like stays here part time or he lives there because he says that he has an apartment above the theater, and that he just randomly pops downstairs because it's a movie theater. Like he just owns a movie theater and he lives above it, so he just randomly pops downstairs and just like scares the staff that are all like high school kids.
That's so cool. Oh my god!
Like I was like, I want to just hang around here, like.
Yeah. Dude, I just want to sign out of here so that you and I can talk about George R. R. Martin and like that discussion, man.
Yeah, but I think that's a really cool idea that I want to hear other people talk about Marvel movies too.
Yeah, but you know what? The best fucking Q&A, the best discussion of Black Panther, Wakanda Forever is going to be right here on my lap. No, on this channel. But anyway, so until then, make sure you guys subscribe to Comic Books Transformed. And Brian and I will see you guys next weekend. May the force be with you.